everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I am here with Michelle Chalfant. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Pete.
Are you excited about this today?
I am. I'm very excited about it. I'm always excited to be on another podcast.
Well, I know, but we're kicking off a new series here today, and we're talking about food, I think for the first time, and the way we eat, right? We've never done a series on diet, have we?
No, but I think it's so important, though, in our health. So
we've officially done so many podcasts that I have forgotten what we've talked about. That is a sign that we've been doing this for a long time. But this series we're kicking off on food and how does what you eat and the way you eat influence your emotional health. Before we get started on that, head over to theadultchair.com to learn more about the show. You can subscribe for free by signing up for our mailing list, or you can find us anywhere finer podcasts are served with a quick search for The Adult Chair. You can join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget that Facebook private group. It's still growing like gangbusters. We sure appreciate all of the participation there. It's so exciting to see that thrive and flourish. And if you're ready to make real change in your life, join Michelle for 3 days of learning to live in your adult chair in person in either Nashville or Charlotte. That's right. By popular demand, we've opened a second date this fall in a new location. So Nashville is September 22nd through 25th, and Charlotte is October 13th through 15th. Registration is open now, and we really want to see you there. What do you think, Michelle?
I think we really do want to see people there. I think that if you're listening and you might have some issues about codependency, love addiction, learning how to love yourself, any kind of relationship issues, whether it be with someone else or yourself, come and join us, because it's really, I don't even have words for it. I wish I did. It's profound. It's experiential. It's learning how to love yourself over the course of 3 days in just a beautiful setting with a wonderful group of people that come together, and we're all vulnerable and share, and people shift. It's just an amazing 3 days. So come and join us. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely. Once again, Nashville, September 22nd through 25th, Charlotte, October 13th through 15th. Registration is open over at michellchalfant.com. Links in the show notes. Okay. Now let's talk about diet. Megan Ramos serves as director for the Intensive Dietary Management program, founded in 2014. She's a clinical researcher herself with a focus on preventative medicine. After her own diabetes diagnosis, she became the program's very first guinea pig and is here to talk to us about her experience, IDM's work, and introduce some of these dietary strategies that can help your emotional regulation too. Megan, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on today.
We're so happy to have you today, Megan. I just want to say that when we live in our adult chair, which is the work that I do, it's about living in the healthiest version of ourselves. And I talk about this all the time. It's not just the emotional health, but it's our physical health as well, which is why we're thrilled to have you today. I would say that our emotional health is, in fact, even affected by our physical health and the food that we're eating and what we're putting in our bodies. So it is with great pleasure that we have you on today, because we have not done a lot. I don't think, Pete, we've done anything with food, actually, and physical. So it's really exciting, because you're the trailblazer, I guess, to let's talk about food. And you are someone that knows a lot about ketosis, and fasting, they're both such hot topics right now. Do you want to just start us out with what ketosis is and how it benefits people and, again, affects the emotional health and physical health?
Well, ketosis means that you're fueling on fat. So you have two main fuel sources for the body. You have carbohydrates and you have fat. So carbohydrates get broken down into their simple sugar molecules. We most often hear about glucose. So glucose is one fuel for the body, but when fat is broken down, it produces ketones, and ketones are a secondary fuel source for the body. Fueling on ketones, it's actually quite advantageous. Some of our organs actually prefer to fuel on ketones than glucose. Organs like our hearts, our liver, our lungs, our kidneys, they much prefer to fuel on ketones than glucose, but glucose isn't useless. Actually, there's this percentage of our brain, a small percentage, less than about 20%, that actually requires glucose for fuel. But your body can derive glucose through other sources, aside from carbohydrates. So it can derive glucose from fat itself, not very much glucose, but enough to survive, that's for certain. And it can also derive glucose through protein as well, through a process called gluconeogenesis. So it can actually convert some excess protein that we don't need. It can convert it to glucose to help our bodies get that little bit of glucose that it does need to fuel adequately. So when you're in a state of ketosis, that means your body is opting to fuel on fat, where it's in fat burning mode, rather than in carbohydrate burning mode. And fat burning mode can be quite advantageous for a few reasons. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're eating in a ketogenic manner, your body's already in fat burning mode on an eating day. So then it easily transitions into a fat burning mode when it doesn't have any dietary fat to fuel on, because it's already in that fat burning gear. So it actually helps us lose weight a little bit more efficiently and more effectively. And I think that's the reason why the majority of people out there seek a ketogenic diet. Another big reason why people nowadays are looking towards a ketogenic diet is because it essentially suffocates cancer. A lot of cancers, not all cancers, but the majority of cancers can be suffocated by eliminating excess carbohydrates, excess glucose in the diet. Cancer actually thrives on sugar. And by removing that, you're not giving the cancer what it needs to grow and be excited. So a lot of people nowadays are trying to transition to a ketogenic diet for cancer prevention and cancer treatment and management. So we see a lot of that in our clinic.
Is there settled research on that, connecting the, as you say, suffocating cancer to ketogenic dieting?
There's a ton of stuff out there, and there's some really great books coming out. One expert, her name is Dawn Lehman. She's based in California, and she just co-authored a book called N equals 1, or N of 1. Sorry, I should look that up before I reference it. But her name is Dawn Lehman, and so she's an oncologist based in the sort of the San Francisco Bay Area, and she actually has a clinic out there, and her results have been pretty incredible. But there's a lot of great research out there on cancer and ketogenic diets. So most people know what a PET scan is. So a PET scan is an imaging test that allows our body to check for disease in the body. So this is what we use to track cancer. And what they do in a PET test is to detect cancer is they essentially shoot you up with glucose. They shoot you up with sugar, and that excites the cancer and causes it to grow a little bit so they can visualize the cancer and where it is. So they give you glucose to make the cancer grow a little bit and get it excited so they can actually see where the cancer itself is. So there's a lot of great research out there. There's some experts. There's another book that someone was telling me about the other day. I was having lunch with diabetes.co.uk, and they were talking about it then. But Dawn Lehman, she's fantastic, and her clinic out in California is doing some pretty amazing things with cancer and ketogenic diet, and they're also incorporating some intermittent fasting now for certain kinds of cancers, and they've been getting really great results over the last 10 years.
That's fantastic. I wonder if we could take a step back, because I definitely have more questions about triggering the ketosis state. I want to talk about that for sure. Like, what is it in the lifestyle that actually you need to change in order to trigger that state? But take a step back for us and tell us a little bit about your experience. How did you end up working with IDM or co-founding IDM, and a little bit about your work there?
Well, I started working with Jason when I was about 15 years old. He was a brand new nephrologist, fresh out of his fellowship, and I was a young summer student looking to gain some research experience in medicine, and our director teamed us up. And I liked working with him, so I decided to stick around. I just turned 33 the other day, so I've been kicking around the last 18 years.
This is you're talking about Dr. Jason Fung, the medical director.
Yes.
And your co-founder.
My partner in crime is Dr. Jason Fung. He's a Toronto-based nephrologist, and we co-founded this wacky intensive dietary management program together. I was always skinny fat, but I was in hindsight, I now know I was skinny fat. people just thought
what does that mean? What does skinny fat
that
mean?
means that I had no muscle and I had weak bones from drinking so much diet soda with all the phosphoric acid in it, and I just had a lot of fat. So even though the number on the scale said something like 90 pounds when I was 19 years old at 5'1", didn't mean that I was healthy. I had weak and brittle bones, and I didn't have a whole lot of muscle mass. I couldn't do a push-up to save my life, but I weighed 90 pounds. And so I was skinny, but my entire body composition was fat. So the number on the scale is a reflection of how much muscle, how much bone, how much fat, how much water, amongst a few other things that your body's made out of. And if you have weak bones and you have osteoporosis or deteriorating bone mass, and you just have a lot of fat, that doesn't mean that you're in good shape. So you can be 100 pounds and be morbidly obese if you have osteoporosis and you're very weak, or you could be 100 pounds and be very healthy if you have strong bones and good lean muscle and not a whole lot of fat. So I was someone who was always obnoxiously skinny, but extremely tired, didn't have any endurance. I did play sports, but I was more of a sprinter rather than an endurance. The endurance stuff killed me. And again, could barely do a push-up to save my life. But I was diagnosed with fatty liver at the age of 12 and polycystic ovarian syndrome at the age of 14. And nobody gave a damn because I barely weighed that of a feather for my height. And all of the doctors said, oh, she'll grow out of it. She's so healthy. Look at her. But I was just a little sack of fat with no muscle and not a whole lot of bone mass because I was a diet soda junkie and would drink 18 plus cans of diet soda a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what is fascinating to me is that the doctor looked at you and saw that you were thin. Did he or she ever say, and what do you eat during the day? Or did they just look at you and say, look, she's so thin, don't worry about it?
And my doctor is always,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, my doctor is always after me. I was 9 the first time I got a cholesterol diet sheet. My uncle had just died from a heart attack, and my family doctor was a full-fledged family doctor. She saw the whole brood of us. And my triglycerides were very high at the age of 9. And she thought that I would have enough common sense to follow the picture food guide to know what foods to stay away from when I was at birthday parties or having sleepovers with my friends. She said, I know when you eat at home, you're not eating any of these foods. But when you're eating out, make sure you're staying away from bacon and eggs and all of the foods that I should have been on. So she was curious about my diet to a certain extent, but definitely driving home the wrong message. So the current standard North American diet, which was causing the fatty liver and causing the PCOS and the insulin resistance. I was the size of a horse when I was born, so I've had insulin resistance, I think, since the early stages of my life. So she was concerned, but she was just giving me poor advice the entire time. Are you taking your fruit? Are you staying away from the bacon and the eggs? And of course, they were forbidden in my household growing up. There was no such thing as butter or egg yolks in my house with my family history of heart disease. So it was just lots of carbs and carbs. And I'd say, oh, well, no, I'm eating the potatoes, I'm eating the pasta, I'm eating the bread, and that was good. That was good dietary feedback at the time as far as she was concerned. And so I continued to just sort of push through childhood, just tired and exhausted. And then in my mid-20s, it didn't improve too much. In my early 20s, it didn't improve too much. But in hindsight, I realized that I fasted all of the time. And that's probably how I survived my education and had energy to get through the day, was because I would easily be studying, or I would just have 12 hours straight of class. And there was no way food was happening. So I think I sort of maintained, fatty liver didn't get worse, PCOS didn't get worse, my weight didn't change, and I had enough energy to get through the day and survive most days. And I think it was because I was fasting all the time without realizing it. There was no way I was eating breakfast when I was in school. Are you kidding me? I had class downtown, and I lived in the suburbs, and I commuted to school, and there was that extra 30 minutes of sleep was so much more important than that bowl of Cheerios. So it just wasn't happening. So I fasted it all the time. I didn't actually start gaining weight, or I wasn't diagnosed with diabetes till I had finished school, and I started eating like an adult. I joined the workforce. I was doing clinical research in nephrology with Jason Fung at the time. And so I said, okay, you're an adult now. You must wake up. You must have breakfast. You must bring your snacks to have every 2 hours throughout the workday. You must make time to go for lunch and not try to rush through the workday so you can get out of there before traffic. And you've got to come home and you've got to eat dinner, and you should have a snack before bed to stabilize your blood sugar levels. So it wasn't until I started following, the Canadian, sort of the Canadian diet recommended by the Canadian Food Guide, that I actually started to gain weight. So in a very short period of time, I gained over 80 pounds. I'm 5'1", so my weight nearly doubled. And then I was diagnosed with diabetes.
How did you feel?
Like crap. It just total. I felt horrendous. I remember coming home from work one day and just lying on bed, and I just started to cry because I had like a month and a half worth of laundry just piling up, and I just didn't have the energy. There were days where I didn't really change or wash my face to go to bed. I just didn't have the energy. And that particular day when I was staring at the laundry, I just started to cry, and I said, maybe it's a blessing that I have PCOS because I can barely take care of myself. How am I supposed to take care of children if I can't take care of myself? So it was really just depressing all around. And I never really talked to Jason about it till I got diagnosed with diabetes. And I did know, but like most people out there are in denial at first. And I knew I was having diabetic nerve damage. I could feel the tingling in my legs at night. I knew I started to spill protein into my urine. But I said, I'm 26. So I'll stop spilling it eventually. I don't even know what I told myself, but I was ignoring signs because I just didn't know what to do or didn't know how to change it. And I went to Jason, and he said that he had been doing some research recently about fasting from a religious perspective after talking to a couple of friends of his, and he was very interested in it. And we started talking about it, and talking about how it relates to the body and what actually happens to the body in a fasted state. And we had this really lengthy conversation, and I sort of felt like I'd been hit in the side of the head, and I was experiencing all kinds of emotions, so mad at myself because everything made sense and it was so simple. But I learned all of the stuff in school that never made sense. I learned all of the stuff through my work that never made sense. And I just accepted everything for face value because this expert was telling me this is the way that it was. It was advice that I was giving out left, right, and center to people all of the time, even though it never really made all that much sense. And so I was mad at myself for not questioning why. As a researcher, you're not supposed to take anything for face value. And it was an emotional toll. And I went home that night and thought about it some more and said, okay, well, I've got to give this fasting a shot, and I've got to change my diet. And it sucked at first.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what were you learning about fasting and how it could potentially, at the time, impact you in such a positive way? And I'm saying this as somebody I've been on a fasting regimen for a couple of months now, and I am so loving it. So I'm excited to hear your progress.
Well, but my biggest thing about fasting is that I think one of the biggest misconceptions about fasting is that you're going to burn away all this muscle mass and you're going to lose all of this protein because you're starving yourself. And
right, your body goes into this quote starvation mode.
And I went home and I looked at myself in the mirror that night, and I think for the first time I really saw the change in my body. And I started sort of poking and grabbing at my fat stores, and I said, this is all excess fuel. Like, this is all excess glucose converted to glycogen by insulin stored in fat cells to fuel my body. So that I've got a whole rig of gasoline in my system, and if I'm going to fast, I'm going to use that rig of gasoline. I'm not going to burn the protein. I was like, I've got an extra 30 years worth of fuel in me to burn. And so I don't need to be scared of that. And the idea of actually burning off all that stored fuel, I sort of think of my body like a garage full of jerry cans of gasoline. And you don't want to have a garage full of jerry cans of gasoline because then it's a big fire hazard for your home. And I said, I am a huge fire hazard. I'm about to blow up into flames. And your body's going to use that fuel over the protein. The protein's functional. It serves a purpose. It's expensive. Your body's going to want to retain that. It's going to want to get rid of the jerry cans of gasoline first. And it's going to want to filter that out of the system. And so for me, one of the biggest things is I knew if I got that fuel out that I would start to feel better. I would have more energy. And that was a big motivating factor to keep carrying on with the fasting when I first started. It's like, okay, today I'm dumping a can of gasoline that I'm carrying around, and that's weighing me down. If I can dump a can every day for the next 365 days, I'll be 365 cans lighter, and that will be a lot easier for me to get around day to day and keep up with my chores and my activities.
So how long did you actually fast for?
I went pretty intense for the first 6 months. I did intermittent fasting fairly religiously. I did 3 days a week. I sort of come hell or high water. I made sure I didn't snack on the days that I was eating. I wasn't eating before I went to bed. I made sure there was a 3-hour window. If there was, for whatever reason, that I couldn't have a 3-hour window, I just wouldn't eat, and then I would extend my fast even longer. I was very dedicated, and I went fairly keto with my diet at the start. Around the same time I was diagnosed with diabetes, I found out that I had a heart birth defect, and I required heart surgery for that. And it was about 8 hours of surgery, and they still couldn't fix the problem. And most of my family drops dead in their 30s and 40s from heart disease. So this terrified me. So I went as clean as humanly possible for about 6 months. And within 6 months, I had lost a majority of the weight. I had lost just over 60 pounds, and I had brought my hemoglobin A1C down to 4.6%. I had an abdominal ultrasound done at the 6-month mark, and it showed no fatty liver infiltration. And I started having regular menstrual periods about 3 to 4 months into fasting. And I stopped having these painful cyst rupture periodically. And so I was very intrigued. At the end of 6 months, I went to have a DEXA body composition scan, and then I learned that despite, being 125 pounds at that point, that I was still 39.4% body fat, and that I had osteoporosis.
Wow.
So then that shot off another 6 months of me fasting. But at that point, I did a 72-hour fast every week. I'd say 3 out of 4 weeks a month, I was successful at achieving that. And I would always do a 24-hour fast on Fridays, simply because I don't have time to eat on Fridays unless someone clones me. So that made it fairly easy. And I kept that up for about another 6 months. And then I just fit fasting sort of into my lifestyle. I did drop another 20 pounds. My bone mass density improved to sort of borderline osteopenia. So that's something that I have to work on due to the sort of life circumstances that happened after my year introduction into fasting. I fit it in when I can. It's always good I always try to do one longer fast a month from 3 to 5 days, and I still can't eat on Fridays, so that helps. I also can't eat on Tuesdays because we're too busy. Yeah. So I do these 2 shorter fasts every week just to help maintain.
You have such a great story because you've gone through some pretty serious medical conditions, I guess we'd call them, and you've recovered from them just from your diet alone, which is fascinating. So can you tell us more about what exactly the ketosis diet looks like?
So a ketogenic diet, I eat twice a day, and we usually recommend to our participants to eat twice a day in 2 90-minute eating windows on what we consider an eating day. So we wouldn't consider that to be a fasting day, even though they're essentially fasting for about 90 minutes, about 16 to 18 hours before their first 90-minute eating window. A ketogenic diet that we utilize a lot in our clinic, we focus on very high high fat, moderate protein, and low carbohydrates. So with our patients, we teach them to really embrace fats, fattier cuts of meat, fattier cuts of poultry, fish, and seafood. But we also really try to get them to embrace a lot of fat that's not tied to protein. We notice a lot with our patient population that they're not particularly physically active. They're not going to the gym and doing high intensity interval training all of the time. The majority of our patients, they live sort of their day-to-day lives and go to work and chase after their kids and do chores at home. So we really try to de-emphasize the protein. So we encourage them to use lots of fattier coffees or fattier beverages. Have a chicken thigh and eat the skin, but really sort of baste the chicken thigh and butter, herb and garlic butter, and pan fry their salmon, trying to get an extra fat through the good healthy oils. And we do.
So does this mean you're a bullet coffee fan?
I am a bullet coffee fan, not on a fasting day, but on an eating day. It's a great way to get some fat in, because people in North America don't know how to eat a high fat diet. And everybody thinks the biggest issue that I come up with experience with patients is that they think fat, they think protein. And then they end up taking this crazy amount of protein, and their body doesn't need that protein for growth and repair. So it converts it to glucose, and they see sugar spikes. So we really try to emphasize the oils. And in our clinic, we do emphasize a lot of non-starchy vegetables, just as a transportation vehicle to get the good fats that aren't associated with protein into their body too. If I tell a patient to get in fat, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go for a cup of almonds. And that's a crazy amount of protein. They could have a 6-ounce sirloin, and they're eating that almonds in addition to a 6-ounce sirloin. And,
Right.
So I really emphasize a lot of non-starchy vegetables, especially the leafy greens. And I'll tell most women to make sure that on their plate of food, there's a good 3 to 4 tablespoons of fat, in addition to any fat that might be in their protein source. And I'll tell men about 4 to 5 tablespoons of fat as well. At each mealtime.
So give our listeners an idea of what, if someone wants to start, just try this, let's say for a week. Can you just give us some idea of what a typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner might look like?
There's no breakfast, right?
Well, I was just going to say, and also I know that with this kind of dieting, there's a fast, you're only supposed to eat a certain amount of hours, when you're eating. So give us some like concrete examples. Like, how would someone just kind of play with it a little bit and start eating in this way?
If you wanted to have breakfast for our diehard breakfast lovers, we usually recommend that you would eat in sort of 3 90-minute eating windows. So breakfast would be bacon and eggs, or eggs and smoked salmon with some vegetables, some asparagus, for example, and maybe half an avocado. And you would try to make sure that your eating window doesn't extend much over an hour and an hour or an hour and a half. And then at lunchtime, you could have a really big salad with some chicken, but have the skin, using about 3 tablespoons of MCT oil or coconut oil, throwing in some avocado in the salad or some olives, or throwing in a few nuts just to boost the fat intake. And dinner time, you could have a nice steak. We usually recommend that for meat and fish, the size and the thickness of the palm of your hand. You could have that steak with some nice herb butter on top of it, and you could have a salad on the side with a couple tablespoons of olive oil, or some roasted vegetables with butter, cooked in butter on the side, and maybe a half an avocado in the evening time if you were intending to fast the next day, just to really boost the fat intake at that dinner meal.
But also, aren't we supposed to eat within like a 6-hour window from the first meal of the day to the last meal of the day? So you'd only eat from 12 to 6 or something?
So
noon till 6?
In our program, we have 2 plans that our patients typically follow on an eating day. They can eat in 3 60-minute eating periods within an 8-hour window, or we have them eat within 2 90-minute eating periods within a 6-hour window. So they would just be having lunch and dinner, or breakfast and lunch at that point. We usually recommend lunch and dinner, as long as they're not eating too late at night. If career restrictions prevent them from eating at a reasonable hour before they go to bed, then for those clientele, we have them eat breakfast and lunch opposed to lunch and dinner.
Gotcha.
Okay. So then how do these fast days play into your program? Because a non-eating day is the thing that I think likely terrifies people who are looking to take this on, right? It's the scary thing. I could never make it. How does this work in your program? How do you incorporate it?
Well, we have patients start out really gradually if they're nervous to fast. So we will restrict them to 3 60-minute eating windows. So they're not snacking in between meals. They're snacking in the evening. That's the most difficult thing most people find, is not to sit there and avoid snacking in the evening. It's to sit there and not snack in the evening times is their biggest challenge. And then once they're comfortable with that, most of the time they'll come in and they'll say, we're not really all that hungry in the morning. So then we cut out that meal. Sometimes we substitute that meal first with a bulletproof coffee or bulletproof tea. Or a fatty tea or coffee. And once they're comfortable, then we push it to 2 90-minute eating windows within a 6-hour period. And once they find that to be very easy, they'll most often come in and say, we're not really hungry at the lunchtime eating window or at the supper time eating window. So then we'll cut out one of those meals and we'll convert it into a 24-hour fast. Sometimes instead of having lunch, they'll take a second fatty coffee temporarily, just to help push them through until supper time. We use things like bulletproof coffees or fatty coffees or bone broth as sort of training wheels to help increase them from one level of fasting into the next. So we do it really gradually. So we try to get at least everybody to the 24-hour mark, and where they would just be taking one meal a day, but not every day of the week, just 3 days of the week. So it's intermittent fasting. And once they're really comfortable with that, a lot of times people come in and say they're not really hungry at dinner time. Can they go to the next day? And so we tell them that they can go to the next day, at least try to make it to the breakfast hour. And most of them don't feel hungry in the morning, so they'll extend the fast right to lunch. So they'll end up doing a 40 to 42-hour fast. And that's sort of our protocol for the majority of the patients that we see in our clinic, is to do these 3 42-hour fasts a week, or a combination of 24 to 42 hours of fasting 3 times a week. But there are a lot of people who do come in who aren't well, who are on a lot of insulin, and we will have them fast for several days, 7 or 14 days, based on Dr. Fung's recommendation to this person when he does see them in consultation. So they will be fasting, and during their first few days of fasting, we do include lots of training wheels, such as a fatty coffee, bone broth, and eventually some people get to the point where they don't need to rely as much on those training wheels to help extend them and get them through the fast.
That's exactly my experience too, and it was really surprising, And I'm one of those people that is just behaviorally, I need a cold turkey like regimen, and so I had a lot of weight to lose and had been making some really poor decisions. I did a very low calorie diet of 600 to 700 calories a day for about 3 weeks, and then went on moved on to roughly Mondays and Thursdays fasting, and then completely, and it is to the point where I am feeling better than I ever have. My energy is high. I feel like my fasting days, I'm doing some of my very best work, and the weight is coming off. And not only that, I look forward to the fasting days, if only because I get so excited about breaking the fast the next day. It's just I look forward to food. It tastes better, now that I'm on this regimen. So I feel like, if anything, I don't know all the medical stuff. I've been reading a lot about it. You have absolutely helped cement some of my decisions here. But if anything, I can share the experience of just being really excited about the fasting. It's not a thing to fear, and it's really possible to make it work.
It's not easy at first.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's not easy at first, but it does get better if you persist with it.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying, Pete, and you, that when we fast, I don't remember how long it takes, but for the digestive tract to shut down, I did a 14-day water fast, and I remember the first probably 48 hours, I was really, really, really hungry, and then it just went away. And I was fine. I felt like I could have never eaten again for the rest of my life. Like I would even make dinner for my family, and I'm making lunches for my kids' school. And I remember at day 14, I'm like, do I really want to start eating tomorrow? I don't know. But is it 24 or 48 hours where your digestive tract just it shuts down, and then your organs get all cleaned out? I mean, fasting it was a great experience for me. But at first it was hard. Like the first few, probably day or two, was kind of difficult. What exactly happens to the body, Megan?
Most people, first, your body will start burning body fat once your liver is empty of glycogen stores. So for people, depending on the severity of their insulin resistance and their body size, it takes anywhere from 2 to 5 days for them to empty out the liver and start to fuel on fat. And then you're fueling on fat, so there's no need for your body to send out hunger messages. You've got lots of leftovers in your internal refrigerator that you never burnt, that are being stored there for you to use them later on or consume them later on. So for some people who don't have a whole lot of glycogen in their liver, I'd say people who are more pre-diabetic or not even in that pre-diabetic range, they usually start to experience sort of this satisfaction after the second day, where they could just go on forever without eating almost, it feels like. But for some people, they've been diabetic for a while, they've been on insulin, they usually don't feel that sense of relief or freedom until the 5th or 6th day. So it's really sort of about clearing out their liver. And usually the more diabetic you are, the longer you've been diabetic, the more clutter you have in your liver. So your liver declutters, it gets rid of the immediate glycogen stores that it has there. It starts to make room for your body to actually move in body fat and break that down to provide ketone fuel for your body. So once your body starts fueling on your own stored energy, then the hunger completely goes away.
So here's a question, and I'm happy to have you on because I didn't understand why this was happening to me. Why could I do a 14-day water fast? And this is way back when I was a raw vegan. I wasn't eating carbs and bread. I wasn't doing any of that. So, but now, hearing about the ketogenic diet a few years ago, I did that. Probably about a year ago, I tried to do this kind of eating, and I couldn't do it because my blood sugar. I have low blood sugar and blood sugar issues anyway, but I would get so lightheaded. I couldn't, if I'm eating, it's like I needed to eat more throughout the day. Like for me, it seems like eating every 2 hours is better for me, but yet I can fast. So it doesn't make sense to me why this diet would not work for me. Or maybe you can shed some light on that for me. Like, is this something I can do if I have low blood sugar
It's something
issues?
That you can do. Most people have to do it gradually. We have people who go to bed with sugars of 400 and can wake up with a sugar of 32, or like really low 30s, high 20s, 4 hours later in the middle of the night. And they're in a panic, call EMS kind of mode. It gets to the point where if you start off slow and gradually with them, they go to bed with the same sugars that they wake up with in the morning, and their sugars before bed are not as high, and their sugars in the morning are much higher. And we tend to call that brittle diabetes in the diabetic patients. But it is something that under the monitor of the right healthcare practitioner and proper fasting guidance, that you can do so safely and effectively and work your way up to doing longer extended fasts if that was your goal. But you do generally start off quite slowly. There's more of an emphasis on working on a ketogenic diet and eliminating snacking and working on meal timing, and then building your way up very gradually. For people who come in and that are prone to hypoglycemia, or hypoglycemic episodes, I tell them, you're 55 years old and you've never been to the gym once in your lifetime. So you can't enter in the gym and do the same workout that Arnold Schwarzenegger did during his Terminator days. It's just not going to happen. So you've got to start off stretching first, and then maybe doing some yoga and some body weight training like Pilates. And then you eventually go into the weightlifting. And over time, you can get into doing the same workout as a bodybuilder, but you just can't quite jump in there yet. Your body's very weak. So people with hypoglycemia, they have more volatile reactions to glucose than other people tend to, even other people with insulin resistance. So you have to help nurture that relationship between glucose and insulin and the cell and the body. So you start off slowly and you work your way up to doing longer fasts over time. But of course, under the care of a qualified healthcare practitioner.
Well, that's really good to hear, because I've always read that that it wasn't okay to do this if you had hypoglycemia. So you're saying it's just working with someone that can help kind of monitor, how we're feeling and what to eat, and maybe do it in a slower way.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's awesome.
Have
Great.
you've heard the story of Angus Barbieri? And the his 382-day fast.
Very much.
I imagine you had. That's one of those things that I think about, and the comparison of his experience, where he lost 276 pounds, got down to a fighting 180-pound weight. And did it over by only doing vitamin therapy and mineral therapy and water and I think coffee for over a year, and had no trouble. Like you read his experience of it, and he says, I was a little weak, and that was about it. This was, of course, in 1966, and you compare this to the our own government's work in the United States of doing these studies on the post-apocalyptic diet. Like, what happens if, and this is a horrible thing to even think about given the political climate right now, but what happens if there is some sort of catastrophic thing that happens? What would people live on in terms of food? And they studied a large number of men who were, given this very restrictive diet, and they were allowed to eat, potatoes, I think, occasionally, and it was very restrictive, but they weren't strictly fasting, and it ended up creating these enormous emotional struggles, right? They were eating packs of gum that they were given to, stem the hunger tide. Like, they were doing all these things that actually created the emotional sort of starvation response. And so you compare this not eating anything with the Barbieri story and the eating a little bit thing with the government research, and you think, wow, not only does fasting work, I think I may be emotionally healthier if I just straight up fast and try to work up to the fasting experience than if I try to just reduce caloric intake a little bit.
Absolutely. So studies like that, where the government used more calorie restriction, the metabolic rate slows down if the calorie intake is adequate enough. So the metabolic rate slows down to that metabolic budget that it's been given through the number of calories taken in. So your body can easily figure out how to survive on 500 calories a day, but your metabolic processes are going to slow down to adapt to that budget that it's getting every day. And that's where you sort of run into the long-term health and emotional problems, because your body is just functioning at a very small percentage of its capacity to adapt to that low-calorie diet. But when you're fasting and you've got like an extra, 100 pounds worth of fuel, or 30 pounds worth of fuel, or 40 pounds worth of fuel inside of you, and you're being active, your body is keeping up with its metabolic requirements. It will just burn what it needs, and it's got a surplus of energy to burn, and to use that. And also, burning body fat is not the easiest thing for the body to do either. You make your body work hard to burn body fat. It's not easy. It's not not an easy process. Your body has to work hard to burn that body fat. And that's how you maintain your metabolic rate, because your body's working hard to derive fuel from its own source, because you're not giving your body enough to survive. So it can't slow down its metabolic rate to your budget. You're giving it a budget of 0 calories. So it's got to derive those calories from somewhere. And that causes the body to work hard and to require a lot of energy to do so, which is going to cause you to burn more fat. So I think that's the biggest difference between calorie restriction and just plain straight fasting.
I love that. I love the way you put that. That actually makes great sense. And there's hope for you too, Michelle, on your blood sugar thing. There's hope for you. You should do this.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I do have one little question for you, because we have this in our pantry. My husband bought it because he's big into this kind of dieting. He eats this way. He'd only eat 6 hours a day. But the powder, what's that ketogenic powder? The ketos, I guess. Is it called ketos?
There's Ketosis. There's a few different kinds of exogenous ketones.
But what is that for? Is that like a meal replacement, or what is that?
It's just supposed to help boost your state of ketosis. I think a lot of people think it's the easy way out, is that if they consume ketones, it will help them lose weight, and because it will get their body into fat fueling mode, and it can help prevent against cancers. But taking exogenous ketones, so endogenous ketones are ones produced by the body, so from the digestion or breaking down of fat. Exogenous ketones are ketones that are put into the body. So sorry, food would be an exogenous ketone. Body fat's endogenous ketones. So I think people think it can substitute for a poor diet. We see that a lot. I hear about that a lot. I get a ton of emails about that. We've been taking, this ketone supplement and we're still gaining weight and we're not losing anything and our sugars aren't better. Well, any supplement's not going to help aid a poor diet. I do have a lot of patients who will try to seek out some form of exogenous ketones just to help their energy levels when they're new to fasting and their body quite isn't fully fat fueling because they've got lots of glycogen stores to burn through first, and their energy levels can be a little bit low until they actually get into fat fueling mode where they're fueling on endogenous ketones. I usually recommend to our patients to go for MCT oil or coconut oil in lieu of exogenous ketone supplements, but either or would be good as long as you're being proactive from a dietary standpoint. They can be beneficial.
Yeah, and he definitely is. He does not need to lose any weight for sure. So I don't know why. I remember we listened to, it was probably a year ago. Are you familiar with Dom D'Agostino?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, he's really big into this kind of, I think that's where we initially heard about even eating in this way. So he talks about it a little bit, but I like what you said. I think you probably took it more for energy than for weight loss. So
where do you stand on sweeteners? Obviously, you're reducing sugars, right? You want to reduce the sugars. You don't want to eat a lot of candy bars. You're reducing the carbs. I'm going to give up the chocolate croissants. I get it. But what about alternative sweeteners and the natural sweeteners, stevia, that sort of a thing? How does that fit?
Stevia still has an insulin response in the absence of a glucose response.
Okay.
So we're not too big fans of stevia. Jason talks a bit about this in the obesity code. And the truth of the matter is we don't fully understand the biochemical pathways involved there. We just know that there is an insulin response in the majority of the population after consuming stevia, and that they feel more hungry afterwards because of the insulin response. So it's counterproductive for the majority of our patients. When it comes to sugar alcohols like xylitol or erythritol, I really don't have any issues about people using them periodically. I warn people against using them on a regular basis because that always keeps them wanting something sweet. So if they're always used to having coffee with xylitol in it or erythritol in it at home, and then they go out to Starbucks for a meeting and they forgot to bring their erythritol with them, a coffee's just not a coffee without sugar for them. Mm-hmm. And so then they'll go for the sugar. And people do not have as much control over the environment as as I would like to think that they do. I did this myself with bread substitutions. As an Italian girl, my last name is my married name. But I made all these great low-carb breads when I first started going low-carb. But then to me, a meal was never complete without bread. And so young, busy, always on the go, eating out, I would just end up eating bread wherever I went because a meal didn't feel complete without that bread. So I realized I had to cut out the bread substitutions temporarily. And now when I have them, I don't make them all of the time. So when I do have them, it's a special thing that is not part of my daily routine. And so I have no problem with my participants, my patients, using the sugar alcohols, at Christmas time, if they want to make gingerbread or shortbread cookies or something that's more seasonal that they wouldn't use on a day-to-day basis. But I want them to sort of get over that need and that desire for something sweet all of the time, since their control over everything is so limited in their lives.
Oh, that's fascinating. That is,
that's
good to know. And stevia, honestly, stevia has been sort of a backup in my back pocket for years. But knowing that there's an insulin response that's a big lesson.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I thought stevia was one of the safe ones. That's all that I use, and I don't use it all that much, but like a little bit in morning coffee. But still, I don't want it anymore now.
Yeah,
I did not know.
It doesn't take a lot of convincing with our patients. They'll come in and we do all of our follow-ups in groups. And they're not getting the results the other people are, despite doing everything but the stevia. Their sugars aren't coming down. Their blood work's not changing as much as they like. The weight loss is painfully slow. And as soon as they cut it out, or even just keep it on eating days and not on fasting days, if they take a tea or coffee, they start to see an improvement of their numbers, and they start to see a huge reduction in their appetite. So I'll encourage someone just to try it just for a week. And if they want to go back on it full time, I'm not going to yell at them. I've had my own food addictions and terrible habits, and it took me a long time to overcome many of them. And so I tell them, try it for a week, just suffer for 1 week, and if you haven't lost weight, if you haven't seen your blood sugars come down, and if you're feeling just as hungry then as you are today, then fine, keep the stevia. I'll never bug you about it again. And 100% of the time, they come back, their weight's down, they've finally broken through that plateau, their sugars are better, there's a reduction in their appetite, and almost always that's enough motivation for them to stay away from it. But not always.
I would think so.
Today is a fast day. I had stevia in my coffee. I want to do over. Like, I want to go back to bed and start again. I feel.
I work with very diabetic patients too.
Yeah.
They're a lot more impacted by a little bit of extra insulin than the majority of the population is. Okay. So that's something else to take into consideration. I don't want to make people out there miserable. But I would say if you're struggling, try cutting it out and seeing if you notice a difference.
Beautiful.
And once it's out of our system, like anything else, then we stop craving it. Like, we really do lose the taste for it.
Well, and I love the way she put it too, Michelle. I mean, we struggle with our own food addiction. It's important to call it what it is. It is also a food addiction.
Yeah, true.
Well, I love it.
This was
Megan,
great.
Yeah, this was terrific. Thank you so much for your time today. Where would you like to point people to who want to learn more about your work?
You can always check out our website at intensivedietarymanagement.com. We've got a great blog post that Jason and I update a lot. Every week there's 1 or 2 blog posts. We've got some free educational videos up there, and you can learn more about our intensive dietary management program on our website as well. So again, that's intensivedietarymanagement.com, and everyone's welcome to follow both Jason Fung and I on social media. He's better at Twitter. I missed that tweeting part of my generation. So you can easily find me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/IDMMegan. Or you could follow me on Instagram if you're interested in what we're eating at Megan J. Ramos on Instagram.
Oh, that's cool. So you actually post meals and what you're eating and things like that?
Yes.
Oh, so helpful. It's so great to have a model. Absolutely.
And if people want to work with you from a distance, do you do phone sessions or Skype sessions with people?
So we're trying to actually transition into an entirely online model. So even moving some of our in-office patients online, just because with our in-office patients, everybody likes to check in very frequently, but it's difficult for them to get time off of work and drive to our clinic, where they can easily do this all through video or teleconferencing. So I would say that we're trying to get the bulk of our program online, and we have a very large online group too. So we use a video conferencing app called Zoom. And it's really neat because we get to connect with people all over the world. The majority are from North America, Australia, and the UK. But we do have participants from all over the world, and we connect in these small groups of about 4 or 5 participants in 1 hour time blocks. Everybody gets their own time to check in for personalized advice with myself or the other educator that they're meeting with, and then they get to learn from everyone else's experience as we move through each of the participants. And you can video chat or call in. You don't have to video chat. So we have 4 educators in our program. I do a co-ed group. Myself and a naturopathic Dr. Nadia, we do 2 co-ed groups. We have a female-only weight loss program with a woman named Rachel, and we have a male-only metabolic program with a gentleman named Angel.
Great. We're going to put links to all of the resources you've mentioned over at your website, and links to the programs in the show notes. Just swipe over and you'll see links to all of those things. You can just click on those and jump right over there in your podcast app. Megan Ramos, thank you so much for your time today.
No
It's been a treat.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to the show. We sure appreciate your time and attention. On behalf of Megan Ramos and Michelle Chalfant, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next time seated firmly right here in the adult chair.